So welcome to another episode of From Cookie Cutter to Creative Crafts. This time it's fabric crafts. Here are some more cookie cutter kind of fabric crafts that we're looking at. Some of them are some kind of stamping that we're going to do something a little bit similar. Here are some sewn animals or stuffies as you call them. Very professional looking, some pocketbooks and maybe some wreaths. What we're going to do is we're going to take material, regular material that we can buy, or we will create our own fabric painted. Now, there are places like Discount School Supply, and I'm sure on Amazon also, where you can buy pieces of scraps, like you can get a whole plastic bag full of scraps. But if you don't have that option, if you don't want that option, I got these in Walmart, and they're not expensive. They're called fat quarters for some reason, and they come in all different patterns. And these are some of the beautiful patterns that I have. Now I'm going to show you, they also have plain ones. So these are some of the solid plain colors that I have. And one of the things that you can do is you can change these pieces like this, where these are painted. I've used this was when I was into quilting for a while, and these are like fabric paints. But you don't have to only use fabric paints. These are jacquard textile colors. You can use acrylics. So this is one way of changing the materials. There's different techniques for how to paint these. You can also, after you paint it, you can stamp on top of it, making all kinds of patterns and designs with different homemade materials. I have this one was used for homemade stamps. And then you can also, which I'm going to show you how to do, is you can use regular stamps and stencils to change the material. And I'm going to show you things that you can do with them once it's all stamped and stenciled. So I cut up a piece of white material into just a few small pieces to show you the different ways we can change the fabric. So these are liquid watercolors in small amounts, and of course the less water you put in it, the more vibrant and stronger the colors will be. But basically, you take a brush, preferably, I'm just using this as a background so my paper doesn't get, my brown paper doesn't get all dirty, and you just paint it. It's interesting because when you do this on, oops, I didn't wash out my brush, I thought it was the same color. When you do this on paper towel, it absorbs it much more, but you paint it, it goes in, it goes through the other side, and then you'll have a nice painted piece of material. One thing to note is that once you put down like a first color here, like I have some yellow, and you have to paint it on, but then afterwards, once it's wet and absorbed, when you take the next color and then you put it down like that, and it kind of works as it would on a paper towel. So here's one way of painting material. So this would be stamping with found objects. I just took two colors, and there's two ways to do this. So I have all of these pieces. I found these in Lowe's. Not this I found this, and I went shopping in Lowe's to see what I could use for printing. But you can do either. You can take your brush and paint it around like this to get, I don't know how well it's picking up all the color, but you do that. Not so well, right? Let's see if I did another one. Okay, let's see that. That looks like it's taking the color more. That is more. Or what you can do is you can spread it out. You could use a styrofoam tray. Let's say we use it. Let's say spread this out more, and or on a plate, and you press like that, and you do it like that. Okay. So the small ones work best when you're just putting it into the paint, but something like this I think works better when you just paint it, and then you're creating all kinds of cool fabrics. And we have stamps, where these are homemade. This was a homemade leaf stamp. This was a homemade heart stamp. I'm using the same blue paint. So here we best off, actually, I'm gonna paint this like this, and then I'm gonna do this over here. So let's see how that comes out. So if I press that like that, okay, it doesn't really look so different, probably because the colors are probably a little mixed up already by now. Here would be a heart. Okay, now I also have prepared stamps. So here you have the standard letters, which you can also use an ink pad, an ink stand pad. You have to make sure it's juicy enough, and there's all different kinds, smaller ones, big ones. See, that one it's probably not juicy enough, but I also have, this is something called an art foamy, which is it was a store-bought stamp, but again, I'm gonna try to do two different colors. Let's wipe that off. And yeah, something like this, you really need to paint onto it. And we could go like that. And so you definitely have some of that. And that is how you can use stamps. So for this fourth piece, I'm going to use a stencil. You can use smaller stencils and make different patterns. I'm just going to use this one stencil. Of course, you can paint the material one color and use another color to stencil on top, but I'm just going to show you this. And the way I stencil is I take pieces of foam. Sometimes I have from old mattresses. This is from something that came. I save all this kind of junk. And you have to, if you want a clean impression, you have to make sure you don't get too much paint on it. So sometimes you can put the paint on and then dab it off, but here it didn't get on that much. So you can just, let's get some of this. And this is another way to change your material so that you can use all these pretty painted materials. For this activity, we're going to embroider on top of felt. Now, there are two kinds of felt. This is very soft, pliable felt, and this is a harder, more rigid kind of felt. You just have to make sure that the needles you use, which are usually I use chenille needles for things like this, which have a good point to go through. So you have to check if it goes through easily, and it has a very, this doesn't go through as easily. So I would do it on this, and it should the hole should be large enough so that it's easy to thread. So what you do is either you have the child draw. This is a disappearing, it's a water erasable pen that after you finish embroidering on top of it, you can wash it off with a paper towel, a wet paper towel, and those marks disappear. Here, I'm going to show you one that a child did when I was teaching elementary school, and you could see the before and after. So they drew their bear freehand with that erasable pen, and when they were all done, they washed it off, and look how cleanly it came off. So the two ways of doing this is you can just draw, they could write a name, or let's say, for example, here we have a cloud, I have some trees, something like this. I'm not going to do this because it's too big, but they can do that. So let's say I would take this tree and draw it. Okay, so I have that tree now, and now I am going to thread the needle, and I am going to sew. With certain ages, I would insist that they thread the needles and tie the knots themselves, but if the children are much younger, then I guess you can do it for them. To teach them various stitches, and this stitch that I would use here is called the running stitch. So you start from the bottom, the running stitch on the back stitch, and you teach them to go down and up gently, and then you go back here, so you're going to include the line that they make over here. This is something that even pretty young kids can do. They just have to learn. There's the running stitch, and the back stitch is where you go back and you fill in the space, the line that you left out. They can only do the running stitch where it's down and up. They can do that as well because it certainly will fill in the line somewhat. Once you have your whole piece embroidered, then you just put it together. And then you would do, they could make stuffies or pillows, and then let's say this is threaded, and then you just do what's called the whip stitch, which means they just come up one way, from up, around like that, all closing it up, and then when they get almost to the end, they stuff it and they have their pillow or stuffy. So here are some samples. This was a standard pillow with embroidery. And then we have a couple where the children made shapes. Here was a watermelon. She did the seeds by embroidery. This was a bear. This was a taffy. And then we have another doll. So there's a lot of variation that can be done. And this is the same way you would work with pieces that you created on your own. Also, just make sure they face in, or else, of course, you could do it backwards and then turn it inside out. But I find with the very young children, it doesn't matter that much, that the stitches don't look so great, and you just put them together and you could make a pillow or a stuffy with your homemade backgrounds. And of course, you can go to my website at eduart4kids.com to get my free report on ditching the copycat crafts mindset.